When the Archers started, there were only 7 of us in that pilot episode, and in fact only 7 of us in episode 1, which went out on January the 1st, 1951. And rather sad to say, I'm the only member of that original cast still left. Within the very first few weeks, those of us who could were doubling parts. My other main part, apart from Peggy, was the Irish Rita Flynn, and she had a very different voice. Peggy's voice in those days was very light and high, and Rita's was much darker, much lower, and she was always getting Phil into trouble. Of course, in the 1950s, television was in its infancy, really, and we Archer stars were extremely in demand for opening fates, and we rarely had a free weekend, in fact. I can remember on one occasion being flown down to Cornwall in a rather ancient Dakota, which had been sort of very loosely adapted to civilian use. When we got there, I found that it was a very large gathering of Women's Institute from all over Cornwall. It was some special occasion. And such was the popularity of the programme that I was literally mobbed. Crowds came in, and the organisers were shouting, "Don't mob her, don't mob her, don't come any closer. Do you want to kill her?" It was quite frightening. I loved radio so much that I very rarely did anything on television. But then, only about 9 years ago, I was rung up and said, would I be interested in doing an episode of Doctors? And I said, well, thank you very much for asking me, but I'm afraid I don't do things these days in which I have to learn lines. And they said, oh, well, that's all right. The character's had a stroke and can't speak. Christopher Timothy had to drag me out of a gas-filled room and give me the kiss of life. And I thought, oh, this is rather nice, I'm enjoying this. And then the real medical people turned up and said, oh, no, he wouldn't do that. He'd put her in the recovery position and wait till the ambulance arrived. And I thought, rotten spoil sports. Of course, quite early on in the Archers, we had quite a scandalous story. Peggy's daughter Jennifer, unmarried, had an illegitimate baby. And oh my goodness, that created a great sensation. I'll read you one of the letters that I had. I think you ought to know that your daughter Jennifer is going to have a baby. Only 3 people know: the vicar, the doctor, and your daughter Lillian. Why don't you know? Don't you listen to the programme? For the 40th anniversary, the big storyline was going to be Jack and Peggy's wedding. And that was not going to be just heard, it was going to be seen. So I had to have special wedding clothes and going away clothes, and we went on a photo shoot, and hordes and hordes of photographers and television men congregated in the road with the pavement in between. And after a bit, along the pavement came a little old lady with a shopping trolley. And she stopped bang in the middle, which stopped everything, of course. And she looked round and said, what is it? And somebody said, it's the Archers, Jack and Peggy's wedding. And she said, oh, I never watch it, and walked on. Not even listen to it, but watch it. Yes, I had a wonderful surprise one morning, later on in that year. My husband was up early for once, and he'd collected the mail and came rushing in with this letter. There, open that, he said. And I thought, what on earth can this be? And it was to say that the Queen was thinking of giving me the OBE. The Queen was obviously primed, because she said, oh, and you're in the Archers? And I said, yes, Mum, for 40 years. And she said, that's a long time, to which I agreed. And I'd been practicing my curtsy, because I was determined I was not going to do a little bob. I was going to do a deep curtsy, as befits an actress. And I managed to do that without falling over. And again, 3 paces back, another curtsy, and off. When I was 17, we were on holiday at a little village on the east coast, And it was a very popular place for families with teenagers. And so a whole gang of us used to go to a little dance hall. And it was sixpence to go in, I remember. And my little group joined up with another group, in which was this fair-haired, blue-eyed boy with the cheekiest grin I had ever seen. And we danced together. And over the years, we saw more and more of each other. And, oh, I should tell you how he proposed to me. Yes, we couldn't get engaged straight away because he hadn't got enough money to buy a ring. So that was sort of put on hold. And then, while he was in the army, of course, he went on a motorcycle course and damaged his knee and ended up in hospital. And it was a hospital that had previously been a mental hospital and had been taken over by the army. So I went to see him in there, and that was when he said he got enough money for the ring, and so would I marry him? And I said yes. And he always said after that that he picked me up at a sixpenny hop and he proposed to me in a mental asylum. That was Roger for you. There have been two big stories for me in the Archers. One was Jack and Peggy's wedding, and the other was, of course, Jack's Alzheimer's. So many other soaps and programmes have treated that subject, but they've wrapped it up in a couple of weeks, whereas we have treated it as a real illness, terrible illness that it is. This, of course, was a reflection in what had happened to me in real life, because Roger, towards the end of our long and happy marriage, began to show signs of Alzheimer's, and it got steadily worse. Then he had a stroke, and eventually, of course, he died. But I have one wonderful memory. Just, I think it was 2 days before that happened. It was a beautiful day in May. The flowers were lovely in the garden. And I said, let's have lunch in the garden today. So I helped him out and sat him under the sun umbrella. And I made a nice salad. We had a bottle of chilled white wine. And he kept saying, "What a lovely lunch. Isn't this lovely?" And that was a wonderful memory to have. Early 2010, I had a phone call from somebody who told me that I was to receive the freedom of the City of London. And I thought, oh yes, somebody's pulling my leg. This is a have. And I didn't believe it until I had the actual official letter. Quite a lot of people said to me, "Of course, now you'll be able to drive your sheep over Westminster Bridge." And I said, well, of course, that is just a fallacy. Maybe in the 1300s when it all started, maybe they could, but not anymore. And that, of course, was a great disappointment to my one and only sheep. And what's your name? I call her Barbara. After the ceremony, they gave me the flowers off the table, a whole armful of the most beautiful flowers. And that evening, I went up to the churchyard and I took one of the flowers, one of the roses for Roger, and another one for my son David, who is also in the churchyard. And then I felt that they'd joined in my day.